Welcome to Calm Time Capsule Sleep Story. My name is Amir. It's a great honor for me to be the voice you hear before you go to sleep tonight. We're going to the village of sleep again, which is where the astronomer's shop and the sleepy bookshop are. You'll meet the last bookbinder tonight, and you'll be welcomed into his cozy shop on a rainy evening. He will read stories to you from the book he is currently binding. Let me know if you enjoy it, and tell me where you are in the world and what time it is. If you're listening, please let me know in the comments. The link to the video is below. Alright, let's begin the relaxation exercise, which will take a few minutes before tonight's sleep story. As I count down from relaxation 10 to 1, let yourself relax more and more. Feel the support of the floor, the bed, or whatever surface you're lying on tonight. And beneath all of that, feel the earth's deep support as you get more conscious of it. Try to let go a bit more and feel 9 more times in your body. Now, where are you still clutching, and where do you sense tension? Grounding support is that unwavering, continuous, and reassuring port that comes from our home. The soil. You may be experiencing pain in your toes, feet, lower legs, thighs, or belly, or you may be holding it in your chest. Alternatively, you may be like me and carry too much tension in your hands or face. And as you lie here now, you become conscious of this tension. Allow my voice to be your friend tonight and a gentle guide. Know that my voice will only ever lead you to safe places. See if you can find peace in that fact. See if you can find trust. Observe the release that comes with awareness. Let go, now that you are safe. And as the day draws to a conclusion, we can become intrigued and experience a small amount of delight in our hearts. 7. The day is over. So, whatever has happened, and whatever will happen, simply take note of them for what they are. Thoughts are a part of being human, but you are not your thoughts, so you don't have to follow them or let them guide your emotions. If and when they do, they will let them go, just like leaves on a moonlit river or clouds passing by in a starry sky. 6. This is your moment. This is your time. So let that fact help you settle in right now. See if you can find that inner peace tonight, so that you might be able to express some gratitude for the small things in life. To feel comfortable, feel the warmth and joy of being able to simply lie here and listen to a cozy story. Your inner peace is always there, just waiting to be discovered. The shelter you're in tonight, the breath in your body. 3. And you start to visualize a small, lantern-lit village with dilapidated buildings and raindrops. You then see a small store that says M. Bellamy Bookbinder 2. You check in with your body again. It's time to rest because it has worked hard for you today. As I tell you tonight's sleep story, it was the kind of evening when everyone in the village seemed to sigh at once. Kettles were being filled. Shutters were being pulled in. Someone was chopping wood down the lane. And someone else was humming a song that might have been from a long-forgotten radio show. At the edge of the square stood a small, lopsided building with a crooked chimney and a sign that appeared to have never been painted. The Bellamy book binder read letters that appeared to be handwritten. The cat was sleeping in the window, but it wasn't your typical shop. Cat heat was made of felt and stuffing and had button eyes inside. The bookbinder was powered by lamplight, and he didn't look up when the doorbell gave its anxious little ding. The shop smelled of glue, old paper, and toast. There were books all over the place, some finished, some half-finished, and some just spines with nothing inside, which looked really strange. He simply raised one hand without turning in some way to say, "Shut the door behind you. It's raining a bit. I'm working on a very specific book tonight. It's almost finished, just a few more threads to pull through, and then a story or two to settle into place. You don't mind stories, do you?" The book was open on the table in front of him, its pages thick and yellowed, even though they were brand new, and the paper had the texture of orange peel. Come in," he said again, more gently this time. "You're just in time. They keep asking me to retire. So I told them that I would as soon as people stop telling stories worth saving, which hasn't happened yet." He turned to face you, giving you a half-friendly, half-inquisitive look, as if to suggest that you might be one of those people yourself. It smelled faintly of pepper, and you ran a finger down the spine, checking the stitching. "I'm the last one, you know," he added, not looking at your last proper binder. "Before I read you this story," he said, lifting the book and carefully placing it on a velvet cloth next to him, "I think I ought to tell you a little about this place, because it's only fair that a story is better when you know where it is." He said, "Sit down and I'll tell you what's inside this one, shall I?" It's a collection of various stories, some short, some long, and some hardly there at all. But they were all lived, and each one was written by hand. He was bound, don't you think? He leaned back in his chair, which creaked just the way a chair should in a room like this. Outside, rain was falling like fingers tapping a desk, and the lamplight inside the shop was low and yellow, giving the corners a soft, round appearance, and turning the edges of the book spines gold. This shop belonged to my grandfather, as he had previously told his father. Moreover, no one in the family can accurately recall a man before that. But we all agree that he had great handwriting and a deep-seated kindness. My grandfather, Milo Bellamy, who shares my name, was able to bind books with his eyes closed, though he never did. He claimed that this kind of thing was only for show-offs and street magicians, and he used to bind books for those who couldn't afford them. He claimed that the value of a book wasn't its cover, but rather whether the story within could keep you entertained. He said, "These are all family bound, pointing to the rows of books along the back wall. Not everyone gets published, but everyone gets bound, including my Uncle Harold, who only ever wrote one line, 'I have nothing to say, but I'm saying it anyway.' He took up an entire page of lovely paper with awful ink. I grew up behind that curtain," he said, his voice softer now. He nodded to a faded piece of green velvet that hung between two tall stacks of atlases, at a small bed in the corner, a stove that always smelled like a hot iron, and shelves filled with toys that weren't actually toys, but rather scraps of paper, ribbon, and the occasional broken quill. I still loved it. "There's something about a bookstore." In he grinned and said, "It sounds fine." He then sat back in his chair and pulled the book closer, letting see which ones wanted to hear it tonight. He turned the thick pages with fingers that moved as if he remembered things. Some had small notes scrawled in the margins. Others had pressed leaves or smudges where someone had sobbed. Finally, he paused and lightly tapped a page with a story he started was written by a woman who never once claimed to be a writer. She worked in the bakery across the square, which you may have passed on your way. It had a small door and biscuits that tasted of nutmeg. Her name was Mrs. Older, and she wrote on scraps of paper, receipts, and napkins. Writing on the back of recipe cards, she stated that the words appeared while the buns were rising. She didn't show them to anyone until she was elderly. But one day, she brought in a shoebox and said, "I think these are ready for a spine." Gave them one, and he paused for a moment. Before slowly starting to read the story, May wrote about the man who once lived in a clock tower. For a brief moment, you could almost smell flour, vanilla, and wet pavements. His name was Mr. Tilby, and he wore a waistcoat with far too many pockets, in each of which he kept something different, such as a pebble that hummed or a spool of golden thread that unspooled on its own. However, he was unable to tell the time, and not a single tick or word made sense to him. His hands spun like weathercocks, and he always got the chimes mixed up at noon, making it possibly ring twice at midnight. He preferred it that way, and a key that he had never used. But the fact that it was there gave him a sense of security. The residents of the town claimed that the clock tower didn't actually need to function as long as it appeared to. They wanted to feel as though everything was running smoothly. Mr. Tilly thought that was very reasonable, so he cleaned the gears, polished the brass, and let the hours do what they pleased. On Tuesdays, he baked crumpets in a small oven beneath the stairs. Every Thursday, someone would always come to the door and ask for help, but they would never say what they needed. Instead, they would just sit on the bench and sigh, and he would give them a biscuit. Eventually, they would get up and leave, always carrying something in their pocket that they hadn't brought with them. No one, not even Mr. Tilby, knew how he decided what to give them. On Wednesdays, he read letters he had written to himself and forgotten. One day, Mr. Tilby discovered a small note tucked into the crack of the front door. It was written in green ink on lined paper, the kind used by schoolchildren or people who still believe in proper lists. And it said only this: "I have lost something, and I think it might be me." There was no name, no return address, and not even a drawing of a postage stamp. Mr. Tilby read it 3 times. He simply reached into a pocket and hoped for the best. Then, W, stating that the tower knew better than he did. Then, without knowing why, he folded it carefully and placed it in the same pocket as the key. That afternoon, he made 2 cups of tea instead of 1 and placed one on the windowsill next to a buttered bun. He didn't wait for anyone to arrive. Instead, he placed it there as a promise. The clock struck 14, which wasn't out of the ordinary. And then everything fell silent for the remainder of the day. Mr. Till sat in the center of the tower, with all the gears gently ticking around him, and considered what it meant. The girl, who couldn't have been older than 12, arrived the following morning. She didn't knock. Instead, she simply entered, looked around at the thousands of ticking objects, and said, "This place is upside down." Mr. Tilby nodded and gave her a biscuit. I know he said that, but it still holds true. The girl accepted the biscuit and sat down. Mr. Tilby didn't mind. He sat, too cross-legged, on the floor and asked, "Did you write the note?" After a long time, she replied, "I don't know. I think I might have." They sat like that for a while without saying much. She didn't say thank you, but she didn't look like the kind of person who had forgotten her manners, more like the kind who hadn't used them in a while. It should have been loud, but instead it sounded more like Mr. Tilby said that sometimes people come here when they're not sure where they begin or end, or what parts are still them and what parts have been given away. The girl looked at him and asked, "Do you give them back?" As she listened to the soft ticking of the hundreds of tiny clocks inside the tower, each one moving in its own way and never quite in time with the others. "Oh no," he said I just remind them they're not missing. The girl stayed until the clocks started to chime again, not all at once, but one by one, as if recalling that she didn't say goodbye when she left. She stood, took one last look around the room, and nodded. It wasn't really missing, just a little misplaced, like the good pair of scissors. After watching her leave, Mr. Tilby took the note out of his pocket and sandwiched it between the pages of an untitled book. The tower was still ticking, and the hours, whatever they meant, would continue as they saw fit. That night, he made 2 more crumpets, one for himself and one just in case. The bookbinder carefully closed the page and briefly put his hand on the spine, as though to express gratitude. He looked at the book and listened to the rain hitting the windows for a while before turning a few more pages with steady fingers, until he came to another sheet of paper that was unlined, had no margins, and had some smudged corners. This time, he said, there were no flowers or magic clocks, just a man, a chair, and the sea. I lived by the water for a long time. It wasn't a town, not really, just a collection of houses where the cliffs started to soften and turn into shore. The sea was close enough to hear at night, he said, tilting the book towards the lamp. It was written by a fisherman who only ever wrote one thing in his life and left it tucked in with a string of dried lavender. He had, and he didn't want to keep it any longer. And that was all I ever needed. I used to go down to the beach in the mornings, not to fish anymore, but to see what had washed up bottles, mostly pieces of rope, and once a single shoe. There was an old straight-backed salt chair outside my door, and I sat in it most evenings. It made me think that a man should sit still sometimes. That one didn't appear to have been worn at all. So I kept it, even though I never explained why sometimes people would pass by without me. It was sufficient. When the sea is nearby, it speaks for you most of the time and lets you know when to stop waiting and when to rest. One day, I discovered a shell in the shape of a heart. I never asked her name, but I believe she liked it that way. You came down to the beach once after a storm. It's not pretty, but to be honest, I put it in my pocket and carried it for a week before I knew who it was, because there used to be a woman who lived 2 doors down. She kept to herself, wore the same brown coat every winter, and never walked in the middle of the pathways at the edge. She carried her shopping in a basket with a wobbly wheel. I watched her from the dunes as she walked along the wet stones, as if she was searching for something she had long since lost. She didn't say anything or wave, but when the wind fell, she stopped and stood motionless, staring out to sea as if I'd just spoken to her. That night, I placed the shell on her windowsill without leaving a note, because I just wrote it down because I didn't want it to vanish when I did. That was all. The following morning, the shell was gone. A few days later, she nodded at me before she passed away. After that, we always nodded. Sometimes, that's all you need with someone. One good nod, every now and then, tells the truth without saying much. He says softly that this one was written by a boy who lived in the cottage with the blue door at the edge of the village. He wrote it when he was 11 years old and brought it in tied with a string. The bookbinder turns another page, and this time the paper is paler, neatly typed, with a pressed wildflower in the margin. Said it was about a perfect day, and I believed him. He then started to read it. The perfect day began with toast knot, just any toast from the middle of the loaf, which was golden but not too crisp, with just enough butter to make it glisten but not drip. It was served on a yellow plate with a chipped edge, which somehow improved the taste because it was cloudy outside. I put on my green jumper with sleeves that reached past my hands and headed to the post box, where I had nothing to post. I enjoyed the walk, and on the way back, I discovered a bench that no one else ever sat on. I had a biscuit in my pocket, which had softened a little, but that was okay. So I ate it slowly while watching a cat chase something that it never caught. And the cat sat next to me for a while, as if we both knew how to do nothing. At night, I changed the sheets on my bed, turned the pillow to the cool side, and left the window open just to crack, even though I could hear the wind. In the afternoon, I read my favorite book again, even though I knew every word. I made hot chocolate in my camping mug and stirred it 12 times the right amount. I sat by the window and listened to the sound of people not needing me, which is a very good sound. That's enough for one evening, he finally said. Because books are like bread, best taken warm and never too much all at once. I didn't dream about anything. I just slept that perfect day. The bookbinder closed the book with a quiet thud, resting his hands on the cover for a moment, as if sealing the stories in place. He didn't speak right away. Instead, he looked at the lamp, then at you, and finally at the rain gently tapping the windows. You have enough stories to take you home now, he murmured gently as he stood slowly and walked over to the door and opened it for you. The air outside smelled of damp stone and chimney smoke, and the rain was still falling, but it was steady and familiar. You pulled your coat tighter as you went outside, and the door behind you clicked shut with a sound more like thank you than goodbye. You felt a profound sense of calm as you left the square, the post office, the small bakery that was now dark and quiet, and of course, the drowsy bookstore. Walking through the rain, It wasn't necessary for you to glance back. You would remember. The stories would the bookbinder make a new acquaintance as well. In the slumber village,